Data protection is a top priority with today's work-from-home workforce. However, current data loss prevention tools inadequately protect data in cloud or SaaS offerings from insider threats. Secure Circle automatically protects data as it leaves SaaS services such as GitHub, AWS, and Salesforce. The protection is transparent to users and works with any application to persistently protect data, even source code. Secure your data with Secure Circle's Zero Trust Data Protection. Begin your 30-day free trial by visiting securityweekly.com/Secure Circle. You want to get the right things done for your security program. Sounds simple, but what are the right things for you? What does done mean? And how are you going to get there? Rapid7 realizes more than anyone how hard this can be. While Rapid7's Insight platform offers you industry-leading vulnerability management and detection and response solutions, their focus is on understanding where you are so that they can help you get where you're going. Visit securityweekly.com/Rapid7 to get started.
Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. If you have a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, submit your suggestions by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. We do review those on a regular basis, and I'll probably due to review some this week. So if you get some in, they'll get reviewed on Friday. How about that? No promises, though. Patrick Carey is the Director of Product Marketing for Synopsys Software Integrity Group, where he is laser focused on bringing solutions to market that help development teams build secure, high-quality software, minimizing risks while maximizing speed and productivity. You can learn more by visiting securityweekly.com/synopsis. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here.
And Patrick, you've basically put together a compiled data from a survey that talks about the SDLC and how we apply security to it, which, as I've learned, both as a developer and security practitioner, is not the same way it used to be 10 years ago. And there's so much more. Complexity is the wrong word, but I think more and better ways to insert security in the process, leaving us with lots of options. Did I summarize that, I think, a little better than just complex, right?
Yeah, spot
on. So, Patrick, tell us a little bit about the survey and what you learned from some of the results.
Sure, you bet. So we worked with an analyst firm, Enterprise Strategy Group, who surveyed just under 380 participants, security, IT ops, DevOps, development professionals, on trends and techniques that they're using to secure software that they're building. This is obviously of interest to us, being what we do as Synopsys for application security, and we want to get some outside information to validate some of the things that we see in the market and try and get a pulse on what these professionals are planning in the next 12 to 18 months.
I found it very interesting because, I'm sorry, Matt, I am guilty of this as well, and that's pushing vulnerable code. And you like to think that all the opportunities we have to identify vulnerabilities at different stages, whether that's static analysis or software composition analysis, that we still push vulnerable code. And I'll raise my hand. I'm guilty. I still push vulnerable code, and I'm a security practitioner as well, and I still do it, right, because of other pressures. And I think your survey kind of backed up that notion that a lot of us kind of still do push vulnerable code, which means we need runtime protection as well, is what I take away from me from that, right?
Well, that's certainly a piece of it. What we see is a couple of things that are happening, and these are symptoms of the both the increasing, I'll use the word complexity of applications, because they're made up of a mix of proprietary code, but increasingly open source, APIs, other third-party components. So it's a real soup of code that's being used to assemble an application. We do that to build applications faster. And because we can build applications faster, the expectations are that we keep building applications faster. So most teams are now, long gone are the days where you would talk about 12 or 18 month delivery cycles, right? You have, at one end of the spectrum, you have the Netflixes of the world who are pushing, updates out to their site hundreds of times per day. Cycles are really, really short. So what the survey showed is that while over about a third of participants thought they were doing a good job in terms of application security. As you point out, about half of them indicated that they knowingly push vulnerable code into production on a regular basis. Another third said they do it occasionally. The big reasons that they cite there is that either their development cycles are so short that they don't have time to fix the bugs, or they know they're going to come back because their cycles are so short to fix them later. Runtime protection is part of it, but I think a lot of teams are recognizing that the cycles are reducing so much that the train's got to leave the station. Everybody knows if you don't hit your deadline. Everybody knows if the code doesn't work. They can they're feeling like maybe they can fudge a little bit on the security on any given build with the plan to go back and fix it later.
Yeah, because the more code. Sorry, Matt, I keep cutting you off. But the more code that you change and the more fixes that you put in, lengthens your regression testing time. And then if you're trying to put a security fix in there, rather, you're like you said, Patrick, the train may have already left the station. And look, I'm not going to hold up, this bug fix that is super annoying to the user base, but I know that I got another train leaving the station right behind it. That's when I'm going to push the security fix, do the regression testing, and get that out. So it can take a back seat, but there's a lot more releases that we're doing as we now very surgically carve out, like every ticket gets a branch, and I'm getting used to this new way of working and still transitioning from that waterfall approach.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The being able to come back and with a short delivery cycle, fix the bug in the next iteration. It's not a perfect approach because a lot of those same companies, matter of fact, 60% of them indicated that they have suffered breaches for attacks named in the OWASP top 10 within the last 12 months. So while they're sort of dealing with the reality of rapid delivery cycles and the fact that they have to get good enough before they ship, they're still not reaching the mark that they need to in terms of protecting their organizations from cyber attacks.
And that's where I wanted to go a little bit, because in order to say, look, we know we've got a vulnerability and we're going to fix it on the next train, leaving the station means you have good visibility into those vulnerabilities. And my question, Patrick, is, do organizations really have good visibility into all the potential vulnerabilities? Because when I look at the AppSec market now, it's massive. You've got static analysis, you have software composition analysis, you have dynamic testing, you have container stuff, you have runtime protection capabilities. There's a lot of different places that you can find vulnerabilities. Do organizations really have good visibility into that, or are they still behind, which is why we also see a lot of vulnerable code?
Well, there's a lot in there. So we're still in a state where organizations are moving up the maturity curve on application security. So if you think of traditional techniques, probably the two that have been in place the longest would be dynamic testing, or DAST, and static analysis, or SAST. Now, the clear problem with a purely DAST approach is twofold. One, as you mentioned, if you wait until late in the cycle, your cost to fix, right? This is true of any bug, not just security bugs, but the longer you wait, the more costly and time consuming it is to fix the problem. And that was always a bit of a problem with DAST, but that's the tool that the security teams had. And it would report back, well, the applications got a vulnerability, but the developers wouldn't have precise telemetry as to where that is. So organizations that are still heavily reliant on DAST are definitely having a problem with visibility. Tools like SAST are still important. We think of it in terms of, if the application is a mixture of proprietary code, open source, and your design logic, you still need a static analysis solution to address the code that your own developers write. But another blind spot that organizations have is in these open source components. So we do another study ourselves, the Open Source Security and Risk Analysis Report, that analyzes code bases that we review as part of our audit services. And across the board, in all sectors, we see greater than 70% of the code in a code base is open source. So a lot of the organizations that you see out there don't have a robust SCA solution in place. And if they don't, then they're clearly blind to a lot of the open source components. We usually find in our audits twice as much open source in an application as what an organization self-proclaims to have when they go into the audit. And it gets compounded by how many dependencies each of those open source components have. So those are two blind spots organizations across the board often have.
Yeah, and I think from a developer perspective, I think it's really important to look at those dependencies and make changes as you go, right? And so in a recent project, I have roughly 10,000 lines of code, and I think your 70% is spot on, because I probably have another 30 or 40,000 lines of code that I'm importing, right? That's open source libraries. And so I made the Python 2 to Python 3 conversion. What hung me up the most was I realized that I was using this library. It was open source, but hasn't been updated in 4 or 5 years and wasn't compatible with Python 3. That throws up a lot of red flags, right? Like, are there vulnerabilities in there that haven't been reported? Did someone else take over the project and start putting commits in there? And what I ended up doing was realizing like how little we relied on that full library. And I rewrote one small portion of it and didn't have to rely on that library anymore, right? And that's just good code hygiene going forward. I think the less lines of code that you have in your application, the better. It's the less that you have to secure. It's reducing your attack surface, right? And getting rid of future potential vulnerabilities there, right? Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the desires that the market is expressing now that we're beginning to bring solutions to market for is to actually move that visibility directly into the developer's hands, into the developer desktop. So traditional SCA solutions, including ours, historically worked once you got to the centralized build. So still, upstream of what you would typically run a DAST tool in, but still after developers have done a considerable amount of work. If you're going to have these shortened delivery cycles, what you want to do is spread that burden of application security across the organization and allow each developer to sort of chip away at it as they're going. So one of the things that we did earlier this year is integrate SCA into our IDE plugin CodeSite. So it doesn't provide everything that the full SCA solution at the centralized build does, but what it does is it gives the developer sort of real-time suggestions relative to the open source they're using. So think of it as, while you're typing, when you see those little, squiggly red underlines to, let you know that you've just done an embarrassing typo and you don't want to send that email out or whatnot. It works kind of like that. The trick is, right, as a developer, what do you care about? You care about, I want to get my project done as quickly as possible because I have a deadline. I want to be working on my next cool project because I'm really excited about that. And I don't want to have to come back and reopen this code again. So the devil is in the details in giving them a tool that allows them to actually build the more secure code, but to not have it be such a burden or a security tax that they reject it, which is a problem that many AppSec teams are trying to deal with as they try and introduce tooling into the development process.
It's interesting, Patrick, and I've seen that feature and I absolutely love it. And I actually want it for my own development because I think it's just so awesome. But what it allows me to do as a developer is do some normalization of my code commits. So, recently we're kind of changing how we make bug fixes and taking a more Microsoft approach to security in that, if you see a flaw in the piece of code you're working in, you've checked it out, to just go ahead and fix that, right?
Yeah.
In your scenario, this is perfect, right? I get the module that maybe there's a bug fix, and hey, guess what? Maybe there's a feature, and hey, guess what? Maybe there's a security ticket associated with it. I can consolidate all three of those down, check out that code, and then go, all right, I'm going to fix a few bugs. I'm going to fix the feature. And by the way, I'm going to update the library that this code depends on. It's going to be more secure. And I'm going to, since I'm in here working already, I'm going to bundle that up into one commit into my GitHub or whatever.
Absolutely.
I think that's super powerful.
What's key in that is the words you didn't use, right? You didn't talk about SCA, you didn't talk about SaaS, because most developers, they're not familiar. That's not the terminology they use. And so, yeah, one of the things we did with that plugin is we actually brought in both the SCA for the open source and the SAST analysis for the proprietary code, but they sort of blend together in that IDE. Right? As a developer, I'm looking at Jira tickets and I'm looking at what the IDE is telling me. And that's sort of my world.
Right.
And I don't care whether it's a syntax error, a security bug, a performance bug. They're all bugs to me that I need to fix. And so we're trying to recognize that's the world we need to work in to enable the developers to actually do the right thing from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, and Patrick, you said it too. When developers are looking at code, they don't want to have to go back and look at it again, right? I don't want to be in this endless cycle of reworking the same code. If I'm there and I got those multiple tickets, like we said, I want to go clean it up. And like you said, to a developer, like when I'm developing, it doesn't matter. I'm like, I want the cleanest code possible. I want no security bugs. I want no logic bugs. I want to fix my performance issues, any kind of logic errors. And the source code auditing or SAS tools will tell you all of that. Even a basic linter, for Python is going to tell you a lot of that too. But I clean it up all in one shot. And it's just so much more efficient to work that way.
Yeah, when I managed, when I wrote code and managed development teams, the thing that I was always emphasized to others in the organization is the thing that will kill me and kill my developers is context switching. If I have to close down one project to go back and work on another project, you lose so much time and just sort of as a developer getting your head back into it. So it's really important to feed that information to them as they go, and that includes, since most software developers are not security experts, that includes in some cases educating them on what they need to do, either how to fix the bug or how to not make the same mistake in the future. Right? That not every developer. And actually, a lot of developers don't come to it with a strong security training background, and so part of it is applying education to them on what does it really mean to write code that's vulnerable to cross-site scripting or SQL injection. How do I even avoid that? So we're trying to do that as well. We do that with the tool with CodeSite, and that was actually an issue that was highlighted in the survey as well. The organizations that reported back on the survey admitted that security training for developers is a challenge for them. A lot of them don't have stable programs in place or robust programs in place. It's fairly sporadic. They're recognizing that the developers that come to them, they're not getting this education as part of their CS degree. And so if it's the challenge where, yep, it's great to shift security left to the hands of the developers, but you also have to then give them the security training to allow them to know, to take that responsibility and handle it.
Yeah. Patrick, when I think about the concept of DevSecOps, it means much tighter integration with our security tools into a lot of the tools that the developers are using. I think what you guys have done with CodeSite on the static side and the software composition analysis side is great. You're putting it right into the IDE so the developers see it. We have more to go, though, right? I mean, we have to think about interactive testing, dynamic testing, other things. How do we continue to make momentum? Are we seeing any trends out of the survey of what's that next set of integration points that we got to bring these security tools into the DevOps process to really get us to that concept of DevSecOps?
Yep. So there definitely was some interesting feedback that the respondents provided in the survey. They were pretty unequivocal in saying that DevOps integrations were extremely important going forward. because their development processes themselves are becoming very tightly integrated and automated, right? So everybody's got some mix of Jenkins, GitHub or equivalent, Jira. They have their deployment tools, and in order to meet their timelines, they've built this infrastructure that automates much of the development process. So a requirement for them to be able to fully and successfully deploy application security is it has to plug in throughout that. So we've been talking about the IDE. That's clearly an important point. The CI automation is actually probably one that's more widely deployed right now, and that applies to not just SAST and SCA, but even interactive application security testing, or in some cases DAS. So you're automatically invoking test suites as the application gets into a runnable state. But there are other things that are important. Integration with your source repos, your binary repos, and now looking at containers as we kind of go into that deployment realm. So deploying applications as containers, whether it's into your own environment or a public cloud, there you're starting to bridge that wall. I don't want to say wall, but it's the interface between the software development organization and the IT operations organization. Mm-hmm. And things like containers have in particular introduced some new complexities, because it used to be with like server virtualization, IT built the template VM, handed it to development dropped the application tar onto it and expanded it, handed the completed VM image file to operations. IT attested to the OS build, development attested to the development build, and we went off into production. But now with containers, it throws all that out the window, because now development is building the container that's got a mix of application code, middleware code, some OS bits, and it comes to IT as a bit of a black box. So we see a lot of interest, particularly when it comes to cloud and container deployments, where IT operations is saying, well, hold on here. I want something that I can use to scan those container images, so that I can attest that what's in there is really safe. And that includes looking at both static code as well as open source components that come in basically throughout the stack.
Yeah. And we're going to see that, I think, continue a little further into the infrastructure side. Is it running on Kubernetes? How's Kubernetes deployed and configured, right? Is that DevOps responsibility or IT ops? What if I'm rolling directly to a cloud service like ECS or EKS? What does that look like? I mean, there's a lot of iterations still coming. That's why I wanted to understand how much of that is visible in kind of what you're seeing in the survey. It sounds like that is starting to come to light.
Yeah, I mean, almost every organization that responded to the survey indicated that they're either well down the path of containers, and at least maybe to a lesser extent on serverless and microservices. So there was pretty consistent feedback that these organizations were starting to struggle with that as they see, even as they shift application security left, as we call it, there are new challenges at the right side, right? There's new challenges in deployment. So we kind of think of it as application security is shifting everywhere. It's really moving from the AppSec team itself and spreading out across that whole DevOps pipeline, the infrastructure, and the people who are responsible for the various parts of it.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah.
Any insight into budgets and how these budgets are going to shift over time? Right? Because when I talk to the financial analysts, right, they're like, well, who's the buyer? Is it the security team or the development team or combination, right? I think most of the budgets are still kind of on the security side, but do you see them shifting over time, where they're going to get more embedded into the development and the DevOps teams as they take on more of the security responsibility?
You're absolutely right. As we talk today, by and large, the security team still holds the budget. There are some organizations, and especially when you go kind of smaller, mid market, that you may not have they may have one security person, right? And so it's not as well defined as a group. And so then the development or engineering organization may own that budget, or it could fall into the IT operations side. So we do see some shifts there. It's not a big bang shift. What we do see is that the buyer is not a singular thing for sure. So we think of it in terms of the buying group. Certainly the AppSec team and AppSec leadership may be the sponsor and provide the budget. What they have recognized, and what CISOs and AppSec leaders tell us consistently, is that they can't just mandate whatever tool they like. That they have to work with and have some diplomacy with the development organization, because they've seen where when they try and roll out tools and programs that are not compatible with the way development is working, they ultimately get rejected. And if development doesn't adopt the tools, you can't realize the benefits. So they usually walk into the deal sort of arm in arm, if you will, to arrive at a solution that works.
Yeah, development's definitely an influencer in the buying decision. I think that's just important for folks to understand, is that security, although they might own the budget, they're not going to pick a tool in the dark without development being in the process. And over time, we'll see where those budgets ultimately sit. But that's an interesting dynamic I've seen as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's interesting as we look at the whole stack, it's like stacks of stacks, right? Like you've got your software architecture as a stack, you've got your CI/CD as a stack, and then you've got various security tools and components. It's like where's all the budget coming from, and which now teams are responsible for what, right? Like I feel like all those lines are kind of still a little bit blurry for me as to what that looks like in an enterprise today. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a perfect time to reorganize and figure out, who owns what and what the new roles are, because I really do think we need new roles and probably new budgeting structures.
So one of the trends that related to that surfaced in the report is, right, for our development stacks, that the development organization has been very comfortable in picking and choosing, components from multiple vendors and stitching them together. And there were enough good interface points and APIs, and you'd have your DevOps team or the development infrastructure team that would stitch things together with some scripting. The added complexity of layering security onto that, one of the interesting trends that has been identified in this survey, but has also been recognized by other analysts recently, is that organizations are looking at this and going like, "Whoa, this is super complex." And then, all the security companies are providing different bits, and then some of them overlap. And then how do I get my data all to be consolidated, because this tool reports this tool reports that. So the respondents in this survey expressed interest in now looking at, well, they would kind of like to see vendors that can them multiple pieces of that puzzle together as a solution, so it simplifies their buying process. So that's both in terms of having the collection of offerings, but there's a couple of areas as well where we're seeing increased interest, both in terms of helping orchestrate the tests that get run, because as we talked about, you have SAST, you have SCA, you have DAST, you have IAST, you may have a fuzzing solution. When and where do you run those? What portion of the code? So management of that and automation of that is of growing interest. And then aggregation of all the findings, right? Because now you get all these tools, and a lot of the teams complain that they're buried by findings. Like, oh gosh, I got this mountain of work to plow through, and how do I prioritize that? So effective deduplication, prioritization, remediation guidance is sort of the next area where organizations are looking for vendors like Synopsys to simplify the world for them, because they're seeing the immense complexity that can happen when you start rolling this into your development cycle.
Remember those days, Paul, right? We went through this evolution in device-based vulnerability management. Application's going to come right through that same kind of trend where, to your point, Patrick, the ability to correlate, normalize, dedupe, prioritize is going to become important. And I think even more important for AppSec than what we used to do in the device vuln management world is because we have to integrate a handful, a half a dozen tools together. How do you get that complete visibility across all those different tools?
Yep. Yeah, and it's going to be the the next set of challenges for the AppSec community going forward. First was getting the security tools better integrated into the development pipeline. We're working on that, and now that it's in there, it's all right. Well, how do I then make it easier for the development organization to respond to and prioritize those findings? And that's where you're going to see, I think, quite a bit of development over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Again, as a developer, I don't want to think about it too much, right? I want to focus on writing really good software, not spending time in meetings trying to prioritize things with everyone, right? Because that's not a good use of developer time either. So to have some automation and intelligence built into that, it really just makes better developers.
Yeah, give me a Jira backlog and I'll work through that.
Yeah, exactly. And prioritize it for me and be like, start here, right? Like that's awesome as a developer. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. Patrick, anything else you'd like to share with our audience today?
Well, I just want to thank you for the time. I think you guys do great work, and this is certainly a topic that we're interested in talking about. So really, I'm happy that we had the opportunity to talk about this report and some of the trends that are going on in AppSec.
Fantastic. I'm assuming we can find the report on your website? Absolutely.
Available at synopsys.com.
Fantastic. If you'd like to use our landing page, you can go to securityweekly.com/synopsis. You can learn more and find the report as well, which I suggest that you read. Patrick, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thank you, guys.
With that will conclude today's show. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. See you next time.